and nearly the end of the second quarter. Oil prices trading today a little bit sideways, but still holding and looking like they're want to move higher. Uh, as they say, fire what fire? The oil markets don't seem to be suffering the same gravity as the rest of the markets, which clearly had a major shock yesterday. Let's kick off this morning with Kieran Gallagher, who is the regional product head of Vitol Bahrain, to talk less about crude, Kieran, and really where the action is at in terms of the oil markets, all about products, the price of diesel, the price of gasoline, and all of the middle distillates that we as retail customers actually pay for. What is that looking like at the moment? And is there any impact there given the trauma we're seeing in the wider financial markets?
Yes, good morning, Sean. Good morning, James, Narendra. Obviously, retail prices, Sean, are hitting the mainstream media now. It's, all the European talk, cost of living crisis, etc., like that. It's front page of the papers and difficult for anyone to ignore. You see the US in $5 a gallon at the pump and £2 for diesel and on the forecourt in the UK, etc. These are very headline numbers. Obviously, closer to where I am or where you are at the moment in the Middle East, it's still heavily subsidized. We're seeing that around the region as well. There's been a lot of government intervention to keep those prices low, and that's where we're seeing the things starting to creak at the moment. Access to US dollars is becoming a problem. This prolonged period of subsidies starting to bite now in some of the developing markets, particularly in Africa, maybe Pakistan, Sri Lanka, etc., like that we're really maybe starting to see this price set actually hit demand. Demand we're starting to see on some of the refined products becoming a bit more hand to mouth because of the backwardation. Seeing super high freight rates at the moment, particularly on the clean sector, and therefore, high absolute price, high premia, high freight. We're just seeing maybe signs that, a little bit of tapering in demand in the sort of Middle East, East Africa, Red Sea type region. But aside from that, yes, Europe, US, etc. We're going into holiday season after the last couple of years. People largely haven't had that freedom to travel. We're not quite seeing that bite in demand yet because people have that eagerness to get on the road again. So yeah, a bit of a tale of two markets at the moment, I would say.
Let's go to India. Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert. Narendra, are we seeing this elevated price biting into demand destruction in India, or is it still holding? What's your outlook for the impact of India when all other markets are falling, but energy costs are still very high?
Well, the retail prices are high, as you know. The government did cut excise, a couple of weeks ago. But it has not really made much difference. Demand, we have the latest data from the month of May, where actually the demand has gone up by 8%. Yes, and petrol demand is more or less back to the pre-COVID level, and diesel demand is still not yet that level pre-COVID, but is fast catching up. So I don't see any sign of demand destruction. In fact, you go to airport, go to railway station, go to bus stations, go to any roads. Full of motor vehicles and aeroplanes and everything. So, and it's also the holiday season when people are coming out and traveling. So trains are full, planes are full, buses are full, roads are full. So I don't see any. But the government has also taken a little bit of step in the sense that they might even consider playing with excise a little bit here and there. But state governments have cut their taxes a little bit the last couple of weeks. And at the same time, the retail companies are not really increasing the price. So which means that, overall the message is that demand is growing. And at the same time, I don't see any sign of demand destruction as yet. But what has happened that we have seen more demand for diesel since we consume, the total makes 40 to 45% is diesel. So we had the last 6 weeks actually imported a lot of diesel from different geographies, though we are also an exporter of diesel, that's a different story, but we have also been importing to meet the rising demand. So as far as India is concerned, the picture looks pretty good.
Let's go to James McCallum and welcome James, CEO and Chairman of Exergy Group, Professor of Energy at Strathclyde University. James, this bumper windfall of revenue for the energy sector, ExxonMobil trading, I think it's having record profits, share price up 80% this year. The whole parallel universe of markets collapsing and economies facing uncertain futures, the energy sector is looking very robust in terms of its revenue, but yet not really putting much of it into the ground. Where do you see the outlook for the upstream sector at the moment?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's a very, very valid point. If you look at that over the course of the year, the statistics which you are quoting are absolutely correct. And there has been reasons for those share prices increasing, not in the least part down to what you've just said, is the money is not going into the ground, it's going into dividend paybacks, it's going into financial discipline. If you take a look at the course of the last 24 hours, though, interestingly enough, we've seen for the first time perhaps the oil majors, the oil companies now actually tracking the performance of the markets. The majors down 2-3% yesterday, Schlumberger down 7% yesterday. So clearly, the point that you're making, which is that investors are not imagining that there's going to be a return to activity in the ground anytime soon. You know, the Baker Hughes rig index, although nudging up for sure in Canada and internationally and in the US, it's not going up by anywhere near where it could go up to. You know, it's about sort of 730 rigs in the US just now, down from 1900 at its peak. You know, so the reality is activity is not where it could be. And there's one of the articles in your News Digest today, which I think really puts a pinpoint on it, which is Reuters saying that the financial discipline or the dividend paybacks, particularly in the shale producers in the United States, is keeping 1 million barrels of oil a day in the ground there. And I think that's what is building the support around the price. I would pick up on the point that Narendra made there, which is, you know, and indeed Kieran, you know, I think we are seeing a lot of travel activity just now, but it's almost like, well, I've got a little bit of money in my pocket. Let's have that summer holiday before the cold winter comes. But the cold winter is definitely coming. There is no doubt about that. I mean, if you talk to people in the UK or indeed in Ireland, where the retail prices at the pump are twice what they are here in the Middle East or in the United States, that people are definitely curtailing their driving activities on the day-to-day functions. And that will undoubtedly flow through after the holiday season into how they change the way they actually are living their lives.
Kieran, the last time we had you on a month or so ago, we were talking about perhaps the change of flows of global oil and oil products. I wanted to get your update on that. I mean, it does seem on a nominal level, the price level, that we're caught between supply concerns out of Russia and disruption there and tightness elsewhere, but demand concerns with China and recession talks. But I would speak to where we're at with Russia and the disruption or lack thereof, the flow and counter flows perhaps moving in the other direction.
Yeah, I think it's perhaps played out to an extent, maybe not the full extent that the market was expecting as yet. We're definitely seeing, you know, even in the ICE gas oil contract, you know, ICE came out during the week just making a stipulation that from January onwards, there will be no more Russian gas oil allowed to be delivered under that contract. So that's giving again further leeway to deliver into Europe and on a relatively you know, short freight basis. Now, what we are seeing, perhaps other flows, particularly towards the heavy end of the barrel, is certainly maybe fuel oil coming through the Suez and hitting some east of Suez markets that have relatively healthy, or some may say very healthy demand for that product during the summer for power generation, etc. And therefore, we are seeing a larger amount of the heavy barrels heading east from Black Sea and Baltics as well. But with regard to the cleaner fuels, yes, perhaps naphtha as well. I think that market's particularly heavy given the amount of naphtha that comes out of Russia, and therefore there's not the same amount of homes and perhaps weighing on naphtha cracks there. But yeah, I would say perhaps, Sean, not to the extent that we thought it might as of yet. But month by month, it gets the shipping and insurance restrictions, get tighter and tighter. Smaller list of owners willing to call to those ports, etc., like that. So yeah, we will eventually see that having perhaps its full impact by the end of the year.
Here, in its totality, Kieran, at the moment, obviously there's a lot more stress on the refinery space. There's capacity issues there than on the crude space. Nobody's screaming or near screaming yet about I can't get crude oil, but capacity limitations within the refining sector globally, is that easing? China coming back? Is there a sense, or is that still a very tight space?
I think what capacity was there, given the current margins, particularly reformer margins at the moment, but margins across the board, are obviously super generous, and where refineries had that extra 5% of capacity up to nameplate, they're hitting their nameplate capacity, and indeed maybe in India we see some signs of going beyond that. We are seeing maybe signs of a little bit of increased runs in Saudi Arabia. They are bringing Jizan Refinery on, albeit quite slowly from what we see so far. But yeah, I think we have seen signs of an extra 5%, but beyond that, it's just not there at the moment. Until we see maybe China being unlocked. Then it's difficult to point to where we're going to see that additional product, because certainly the will is there, I think the crude is there, at the moment as well, but there just isn't the capacity, as you say.
Narendra, as you articulate, India yet to feel the full force, perhaps, of the current inflation concerns. How much of a benefit has been the opportunity to import discounted Russian crude in order to support the economic impact of elevated oil and energy prices?
Well, benefits negligible, not really much. I mean, I see in Western media, of course, a lot of these reports, but the fact is that, if we consume roughly 5 million barrels a day, and out of that, even if we get 300,000, 350,000 barrels a day from Russia, then really it doesn't make much of a difference, because look at the prices. I mean, the way we calculate is that we are paying $30 per barrel premium. That is a sanctions premium. Sanctions imposed by the United States, not by India, not by the United Nations. So we are paying the $30 per barrel. So
on all the rest of it.
Yes, I mean, yes, exactly. So the point I'm trying to make is that so no benefit at all offshore, because it's not easy to import oil from Russia, because there's shortage of tankers and the payment issues are there. Let me give you an example. Only just 10 days ago, 3 major Indian refineries went to Moscow: Indian Oil, Hindustan Petroleum, and Bharat Petroleum, to negotiate, a little bit long-term contracts on discounted rates. 2 companies actually had to return empty-handed. Only Indian Oil succeeded. So it's not that the impression that's created that a lot of this oil is flowing to India and India is a major. That's all. There is no truth in it. The fact is that that we are paying premium for no fault of ours. I have maintained from day one on your show and other shows that you see sanctioning Russian oil is a strategic mistake. Russia, of course, must be suffering, but I see the United States suffering even more. West Europe suffering even more. The world suffering even more. India is suffering so much for no reason. The US didn't consult India before imposing the sanction, but we are paying the price. We are paying the price $30 per barrel, and we consume 5 million barrels a day. So you calculate. So even if, for instance, we import 300,000 barrels of oil from Russia, get a little bit of small discount, does it really count? I mean, anyone who knows anything about the mathematics, even the little m of mathematics, would understand that is actually
what would India like to
loss for us.
What would India like to see happen now vis-a-vis the war in Ukraine? What would you like to see change in order for it to be a more aligned position from an India point of view?
Very good question. Not only India, the global economy. I mean, I think what is important is that, you know, at this stage, it is still not too late, but to, you know, if the US wants to maintain the sanction for its prestige, it's a different story, but I think they should go easy on that so that the Russian oil can continue to flow to the global market, including actually even the United States. I mean, so these sanctions, oil as soon as you can, because it does not work. The point is that have we seen any solutions in Ukraine? No, it's no longer you know, over Ukraine or in Ukraine. It's more about the US, Western, NATO, and versus Russia. If that is the case, why are you making India? Why are you punishing India for that? Why are you punishing 3 billion poor oil consumers around the world? There is 3 billion people living below energy poverty line on the globe, on the planet. Why are you punishing them? So what we would like to see is that these countries stop, or at least, you know, keep oil out of it, de-weaponize oil, de-weaponize natural gas. Do that. You know, it's good for the world. What is the point? You want to punish Russia, but why are you punishing India? Why are you punishing the whole world? That's my point. And wait for some time. I know a little bit of economics. I'm a trained economist. That Europe will be paying much heavier price than India come this winter. And the United States is already paying very heavy price. What's the point? So whosoever took the decision to impose sanctions against Russian oil, think it through carefully.
I think the point there, James, is that to a certain extent, the question in the West is that, at least up till now, there's been a willingness to take some pain in order to take a position against Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And so they're willing to take some pain. I'm wondering what's your outlook for that? Obviously, you're living in Dublin and Europe, where the appetite to keep taking pain or this alignment within Europe vis-a-vis the Russian position.
Yeah, look, I think Europe has been prepared to take some pain, but clearly there is a fracture within the European Union as regards, you know, who's taking the pain and who's having the chance to opt out. I mean, you made an extraordinarily good point yesterday around at what point, you know, if you were a German, do you sort of like say, why are we continuing to turn off our nuclear plants, you know, as we go forward? But I just kind of want to come back, if I may, Sean, for a second, to the point which Narendra is making. And Narendra, I greatly enjoy your commentary on the morning Gulf intelligence calls, but I'm going to kind of come back at you on, because for me, I think there is a contradiction in a couple of the points which you're actually making there. Number one, I actually do think the United States at the present moment in time is going soft on sanctions, because they're not introducing secondary sanctions. They're turning a blind eye at the present moment in time to countries around the world that are having access to discounted Russian crude. And that discounted Russian crude is flowing into countries which also have a significant refining capacity and which is underpinning their ability to continue a strong manufacturing sector. And if I focus simply in on China, you know, the recent PMI index and data coming out of China shows that they are, despite the COVID situation, on the verge of 50, which is when they're actually expanding. But if I come back to you, Narendra, on India, you know, I have long quoted you on the fact that India's, if you like, fossil fuel usage, not just oil, but in coal, is fueled off of a need to keep your economy moving forward. Your words, the Indian economy fails if oil prices go above $75 a barrel. Well, clearly, oil is very far above $75 a barrel right now, and yet the Indian economy is not suffering. You've just said that on this call this morning. It is moving forward. It is progressing forward. It is the single economy in the world which seems to be maintaining its growth. Now, there's a contradiction there, Narendra. Surely, if you're not importing low-cost Russian crude oil, why is your economy still continuing to grow?
Can I answer this question?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah. You see, when I say the growth, we are maintaining right now growth in the region of 8%. But let's not forget, this is a growth where we have calculated the time. We are starting from a COVID period. That's why we're saying 8%. If you really go for the comparison, let's say the growth we achieved the last 5 years before COVID, and then you come to that, we have suffered. That's why our GDP should have been today at least $3.3 trillion on nominal basis, which is now. We are in the region of about 2.7 trillion, thanks to all these, COVID and sanctions and so on and so forth. When I say economy is still doing well, because the government then had to cut taxes, the state government had to cut taxes, which means that somewhere you're sacrificing, somewhere you're cutting on welfare schemes, somewhere you're cutting on infrastructure expenses, and so in order to maintain the growth momentum. So there's a lot of maneuvering here. That's not the kind of, for a large economy like India and fast expanding economy would like to see. So we have to do a lot of, manipulations, a lot of, interjections and a lot of, adjustments here and there. While what we need for a country like India, one home to 1.36 billion consumers, what we should be ideally growing at least 9 to 10%. And we are ready to pay the market price. As I've repeatedly said, anything more than $70, $75 per barrel is a huge burden on our economy. What works best, good for us is something between 775. And let's not forget, we are the third largest oil market on the planet. And we are going to be the second largest very soon. So we are very important for OPEC and other oil exporting countries. But as far as the Russian oil is concerned, yes, it's for the sake of our energy security. America, when they imposed sanctions, they didn't consult us. And we are entitled to basically make sure that our energy security is taken care of. But that said, at the same time, it's not making Russian import is not making any significant difference in terms of our overall economy or our import bill, so forth, because rupee is depreciating. Even today, rupee is touching almost 80 rupees, $1. We have never in our life seen anything like this. When our refiners have to buy Russian oil or American oil or any other oil, we have to go to Reserve Bank of India and buy dollars. We are paying much more for that dollar, $1, much more than we were paying.
Let's just, I want to bring in
the sanctions.
Kieran about, again, distorted markets, right? We've got, as Narendra just mentioned there, this bionic dollar. I think it reached a 20-year high today on the basket over 105. But also, Kieran, what is the distortion into Asia, east of Suez, by discounted Russian crude and products, and now also discounted Iranian products and crude, and maybe even more, that you have this distorted market from a price point of view? What impact does that have and the outlook for that?
I think the straightforward impact is there's, as I spoke earlier, there's already fantastic margins available to refiners. The impact is that there's a bonus margin on that by importing Russian or indeed Iranian crude. So that's the first part of that question easily answered. And I think, there are a huge amount of exporting refineries east of Suez that are enjoying that bonus margin at the moment, shall we say. With regard to the sort of the products, etc., yes, there's those flows are there. The Iranian flows have been there for some years. What we can follow in those exports have gone up and down seasonally, etc. And as I touched upon in my last point, we're still seeing it play out on the part of the Russian product coming through the Suez or around the Cape, etc., into this region. I don't think the full impact has yet played out. I think that's to come in the current months. But as a base case, I think it's the refiners that are enjoying the
on that point, Kieran, if we see in the second half of the year, we have a regular commentator on here from China who's forecasting that in the coming months, that Russian discounted crude will move from about 15% what it was previously to now about 30%, and maybe by the end of the year even to 50% of Chinese imports, which would put it up in pretty big numbers. And India, I presume, will take more as time goes on as well. When you get to those kind of volumes, again, the market stability in terms of pricing and for the actors that are complying with rules and those that are not are doing the parallel. How does that outlook for the market structurally?
Well, I think you've got to take it back from the base demand and where's the price set. Don't forget there is an extra 400 a day, month on month, to come from OPEC as well. So it's at what stage does this flat price bite into demand? At the current, even in a world where demand stays stable until the end of the year, you could argue that there's more than enough room for that extra OPEC month by month capacity to come back into the crude market. It's where's the additional demand, and that additional demand, the capacity is in China, so it's natural that demand is there, but equally it's where is the Chinese domestic demand then? Because if this zero COVID policy rolls on, we've just seen Beijing. It lasted all of 3 days before there's large sections of the city closed down again. So to your previous commentator that spoke of that development in Chinese crude demand, yes,
it was imports, yeah.
Sure, and I can see an argument for it, but very much will be dictated by their own domestic policy in terms of lockdowns and freedom of movement.
We'll certainly be interested to see if the Saudis and other Gulf Arabs start to discount their OSPs as time goes on, given the competition that kind of volume would present into the second half of the year, all things remaining equal. Let's get the survey question result in. I was really sort of puzzled as to where to put this today, so I thought we'd just bring it home to make it nice and personal, because obviously the big question this week is will the Fed go beyond the market expectation of 50 basis points into 75. And my question is, when will we start to see this impact of inflated prices, and where will people individually look to put their impact? James indicated earlier, in Ireland, people will start driving less. But which will you choose as a last resort to adopt as inflation bites this summer? As a last resort, which one of these would be the last resort to adopt? Not first, which will be the last one to get impacted in your house, in your company, or whatever it might be? Let's see where the view of the room is on that. Let's just go around. Narendra, the big news this week, of course, I mean, there's many things, but ultimately the price of money is going to go through the roof. We're looking at it seems the consensus moving to 75 basis points on the dollar, 75 basis points on US rates and elsewhere. What does that mean for you, for the world, do you think, and for India, and obviously in this case?
Well, of course, it's not a great news, because what's happening with interest rates going up in the United States, inflation going up, and things kind of, beginning to get a little bit out of control. That's the impression one gets. And US is the largest, the biggest economy on the planet. Now, for us, it's of course an area of worry. The same goes for European Union, Bank of England, and also Bank of Japan and others. So overall, when you look at the picture, you see, since our economy is so closely integrated with especially of democracies of the world, I mean, it's an area of worry. In India, also, our central bank is following the same. Now we are keeping very close on eye on the American central bank, what they do and how they handle it. But the overall, when you look at the inflation figures, especially whether the consumer figures or otherwise, I mean, from the US, that's really a very, very, very news for us. And our bankers, central bank is struggling in terms of monetary policy, how to deal with it. And the result is, the interest rates are going up, especially in areas like housing, which is a major, player in the Indian economy, especially in terms of boosting jobs and expanding the economy. And the same goes for a number of other areas, including infrastructure, cement, steel, and so on and so forth. So overall, when you look at it, there are lots of areas of worry. And the news coming out of Washington, D.C., especially the central bank, and the same from London, same from European Central Bank, actually started worrying India quite a lot these days.
Kieran, your thoughts on that? I mean, we've seen, if you look at the historical charts, that inflation and rising rates are not necessarily detrimental to oil prices and so forth, that they tend to be a lagger at some point beyond the curve they impact. Your thoughts on this outlook for this, what looks like now an accelerated cycle of tightening?
Yeah, I think, it's perhaps in the US, we see a bit more playing out where, it's Wall Street, it's the Fed, etc. And then, as I said, it's $5 a gallon at the pump, that there's maybe a little bit of reluctance to buy into the sort of forward commodity curve at the moment on the US. In Europe and east of Suez, it's a lot more fundamental. There is there's a genuine tightness in the market there, and there is a concern about the product flows coming into the market further forward. So it's easier from a fundamental point of view to buy into those forward values because it's real. And so there is a bit of a disconnect between the macro and the inflation versus the commodity complex.
But as you mentioned earlier, I think you mentioned was that this development puts a lot of economies in Asia under great duress. We've already seen Sri Lanka fall. Pakistan is starting to wobble. Nepal and these dollar, we heard Narendra mention 80 rupees to the dollar. All of these compounding factors could have a sort of a contagion impact. Do you see that, or from a demand point of view, your outlook for that?
Yeah, I think we do see it. I think we do see it. I think we are seeing signs of sort of hand-to-mouth buying from a lot of underdeveloped or developing economies. Certainly, we're seeing on the cargo front sort of less buying. It might be just a cargo a month or something, but we're seeing sort of bigger financial hold issues. And maybe a larger buildup of vessels waiting to discharge at this port because access to US dollars to pay for those. So the local currency is there, but the access through the central banks to get to the US dollar. So I think we are seeing signs. And as you say, it's a bit of a contagion effect. We're seeing maybe right down the east coast of Africa, over to Pakistan, Sri Lanka for sure, as you mentioned. Just that little buildup and small drop in demand that from an overall basis is starting to bite. Yeah, we're seeing.
Well, as counterparty risk grows, obviously the appetite to trade will also become hesitant. Let's get the survey result and give James the last word this morning. It seems spread across the charts, and we'll roll this survey question out on Twitter today and see where it goes with the wider public. But lower quality food, drive less holidays away. Those are some of the thoughts where it will all pan out. James, your thoughts just closing out on that point of view from a demand destruction and where or will we ever sort of see new supply come in fast enough in order to meet the tightness that we're currently seeing?
Yeah, look, I mean, clearly the survey, as I expected, is all of the above. It was always going to be mixed. Look, the world needs to find a balance in terms of how it's actually accessing energy. Whether that's nuclear in Germany, whether it's oil from other producers, oil coming out of the shale base. There's some really good chat in the chat room, and I urge your listeners to go and have a look at it. For me, the issue around interest rates is if you like, clearly it's a measure to try the US trying its level best to put some curtailment on what's actually happening with the current economic environment. But without a shadow of a doubt right now, the one big ticket item that's out there is we will not solve any of this if we begin to go soft on any country that has embraced an expansionist agenda and taken the world into a war environment. And the moment that is Russia. And the United States is quite clearly running around trying to work out how it can talk to the Middle East, how it can talk to China. It's probably given up on how it can talk to Iran, around how those countries can play a part in either bringing additional production into the marketplace or taking a more robust position against Russia. But for me, I cannot see the world continuing to take a soft option, and particularly the United States continue to take a soft option against other global economies which are benefiting from low cost fuel sources, whether that be Russia or Iran. And if that means more introduction of secondary sanctions, and I know several of your listeners don't believe in the sanction as an instrument, it's an extremely blunt instrument. We are clearly in a world where all of the parts are moving, and I cannot, for the life of me, think that we're not going to end up in a situation in the next 2-3 months where there is going to be either a tightness in additional secondary sanctions to economies that are accessing Russian oil, or we find a different answer to bringing additional hydrocarbons into the market. And that might be telling US shale oil producers that they're going to pay a windfall tax unless they start to take on more rigs and more activity in the Gulf, bringing that into the marketplace.
If
but
indeed,
we're in for a very rough 2 months, Sean. Very rough 2 months.
Even if indeed there are the rigs available, I suppose the question is, is there a cliff over the hill or is it a slope? As we saw in 2008-9, we went off a steep cliff. Is this one where we'll see the same?
Well, I'll tell you what, Sean, one thing I will tell you is that happened yesterday is the S&P 500 went into a bearish market. The average over the course of the last 40 years is a 30% decline from the peak, which we saw this year in January 2002. And those bear markets last typically anywhere between 4 and 6 months. That's where we're headed, and it started yesterday.
Thank you so much, Kieran Gallagher. Really appreciate your insights this morning. As always, Narendra Tanea, thank you so much for joining us, and James McCallum as well. Great to have you all. We're here every morning, 10:30 UAE time. All the best. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Kieran.
Thank you.